Okay, there we go. Okay, guys. First questions first. In terms of the two assignments, the one which was uh, guiding principles and the other was the philosophy. Give me an idea where you're at on those. Anybody have any questions or comments about them?
No.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. So what that was mean as far as finding a philosophy of leadership online,
Uh-huh.
I decided to pick Hegseth and AOC.
Oh, you're in trouble already, I can tell.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm not sure if I totally missed the understanding of the assignment there. Let me know. I can
Well,
redo it.
with the last
Yeah,
recording we had, I actually gave a framework for it. And the
okay.
philosophy of ministry, actually, what it does is it frames how you're going to approach ministry. My philosophy of ministry obviously has a lot to do with being mentored by J. Robert Clinton and leadership emergence theory. That kind of sets the tone for me. And so when I wrote my philosophy of ministry, um, that was the basis for it. But the guiding principles are, again, those axiomatic principles that you identify as helpful in framing how, if you're an undergraduate, framing how you will lead, and that they are going to be the overarching principles or values through which you process decisions of consequence when faced with them, and that calls you to exercise your leadership. So that's what that's all about. Ezekiel, were those
Scoring me a
articles were those articles I sent you helpful? Did you get a chance to read them?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it was very helpful. Thank you. Especially when it came to the Trinity.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I met with my guys last night, 22 guys that are going through what I call ground zero for Art of Warrior Ministries. And I walked them through the Trinity. And I used a picture of an ocean in the background with a picture that you pour water from. There was a glass and there was a bowl. And I walked them through and told them that I was going to take the ocean and pour it into these cups. And I says, is the ocean in any of these receptacles the same? And they said, yeah, they're all the same. And I says, what's different? And just the boundaries for the ocean. And I says, that's the functions of each member of the Holy Spirit. One's a cup, one's a pitcher, and one's a bowl. And then, of course, I related to what I sent you. Let's see. I wonder if Latrice is there. Is she here? Okay. All right, guys. Let's move into. If you have no questions about the assignments that you will be turning in by midnight tonight, want to encourage you to always look at the syllabus to see the description of the assignment so that you comply with it. And then go over to the rubric on the course site to see how it will be graded. That should give you a good idea of, at least, it doesn't deal with the content as much as it deals with how it's laid out and everything. So, and when you submit your assignments, make sure you always have a cover page. Okay, that's important to have a cover page. So anyway, the other thing,
Including our journals?
no, not the journal,
Okay.
not the journal. Remember, excuse me, that the journal is your gleanings. The journal is for you. It's not for me. What it tells me is that you're engaging the material, that you're drawing from it. And hopefully the readings that you are doing and the assignments that you are completing will inform your discussion forums in terms of what you're posting and what you're referring to. Also, your replies to those discussion forums. So Vivian just joined us. Let me get her down here.
So I think for me, for this week's assignments, writing the leadership philosophy, I felt like our conversation last week helped me really understand that component. Um, it was the piece of finding other people's leadership philosophies online that I
Yeah.
was like, I'm not certain 100%, like, am I supposed to choose a certain organization? Like the process of that was a little bit more. I was a little bit unclear on that component, like just
Yeah,
any leadership philosophy
yeah,
or
any philosophy would have been fine. And what you're coming to conclude is there's very few examples of it online.
yeah. So I was like, I don't know, like how do
So
I
what does
find
that
you?
so what does that tell you, Rachel, if there's very few of those online? That not many
That
leaders have a ministry or a leadership philosophy.
Right. And I come from a teaching background, and like, I've written and read many teaching philosophies, but this idea of a leadership philosophy took me a lot longer to seek out those online. And then I was like, well, am I looking for the right thing?
Yeah.
So that was the component. Writing it and, looking at that template you gave and navigating that felt a little bit clearer for me than the finding and evaluating the online ones.
I can tell you from 50 years in leadership in various capacities and sectors of society that leadership philosophy was crucial. It even defined the questions I would ask when being interviewed for a new job. And
I can see
so,
that.
because I'd take pieces from my leadership philosophy, I say, am I going to be able to do this with the people that will report to me? Do you understand how I lead? My leadership philosophy is a description of how I will lead and what will be the foundation I'm standing on when I do lead. And so every time that I've shared that, well, first of all, I've never had to, I don't know why, maybe God is just gracious. I've never had to look for a job because these different companies always sought me out for some reason. But anyway, when I'd share my leadership philosophy, it was a kind of an eye opener for many of the interviews that I did for the person that was interviewing me, because very few people, they said, that they interviewed had a leadership philosophy. And so it says that tells us a lot about how you're going to lead in our organization. So we very much appreciate that. So it's not something that you're going to put away in a folder and forget. It's something that I hope that you're going to be able to use, and you're going to keep honing it and revising it till it actually reflects how you lead or how you have learned to lead. That's the importance of it. Okay, have all of you chosen a project yet? It's very important that you get that nailed down, because the next 4 weeks we're moving from you as a leader to you leading a project. So you have to nail that down, and don't make it, as I said, I think with Chad, too robust, because you get lost in all the detail. Like if there's a particular ministry that you want to revise, maybe it's, or something in the church, make it bite-sized, take a chunk of it to use this as a project. If you're conceptualizing something new, well, then that's the best place to be. And even if you're conceptualizing something you don't plan to implement in the future, but using it as a foil for your planning, that's fine too. But narrowing that project, and we're going to walk through that a little bit. But what I'd like to hear from each of you is what you gleaned from the readings, whether it was the nonprofit or Leadership Beef Jerky or anything else that you were reading. I'm just curious about what insights are you gaining? What are you picking up on? Or is it just another assignment you have to complete?
For me, in chapter 15 of the nonprofit, I really like those affirmation of the world changers profile. I thought that, and particularly number 3, Christ-centered leaders embrace a great commandment motivation that compels them to address poverty, illness, exploitation, discrimination, oppression in the world. They possess a burden of those who, for reasons of culture, social submission, anyway, goes on and on. But
well, that must have resonated with your interest and your passion.
Yeah, it does. And I think the intersection of the Great Commission and the Great Commandment oftentimes those have been disjointed, a little bit like faith and secular have been disjointed, Great
Yeah.
Commission and Great Commandment. But those two woven together are wonderfully powerful and impactful. So I really appreciated that kind of marrying together there.
Good, good. Someone else. You know, I'm going to ask this question every time we gather.
Yeah. So I found when I was reviewing those other leadership philosophies, the one that stood out in chapter 12 of the nonprofit leadership book, was about the firing part.
Yeah.
He talked about letting somebody go as a act of freeing somebody. And I would say I'm pretty good with accountability, but I tend to hang on to people a really long time, second, third chances.
Yeah.
And that kind of shifted it a little bit. I know I've seen that even with my own life of, encountering barriers, but then somebody giving me the hard truth to say, hey, go do something else,
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I found that helpful in leadership beef jerky, the centering versus, the balanced life.
Yeah.
I found that helpful. Just this whole process with the life purpose and committed passion, kind of, again, giving myself a job description that's more centered versus rigid. Because in the past,
Yeah.
I've done schedules, a lot.
Yeah.
I've got hours for this and hours for that, which is always interesting, the work-life balance. I've always wrestled with because ministry kind of comes sporadically. My background is in 24/7 ministry programs, and so I'd get phone calls in the middle of the night about
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And kind of just the way it goes. And so I've wrestled with that in the past. So I found that centering chapter really helpful.
Yeah. It's going to happen to all of you if it hasn't happened to you already. If you're the least bit confident, you'll acquire tasks that weren't originally a part of your job description that somebody else can't do. And they come to you because you have this reputation for getting it done. And what that does is it changes the scale. The scale has two plates on it. One plate is the things you have to do what you love to do. And the other plate is what you love to do. And so when people come to you and try to pass their monkey on your shoulders, I call it their task, their monkey, take my monkey, it just keeps adding weight to the things you have to do. And every now and then you have to calibrate that by trying to adjust it, or at least going to your boss and saying, look, half of my life, if not more, in this company or in this church or in this organization is fixing other people's problems. And I'm good at it, but in order to have the energy and the life to do that, I need to be involved in things that I love to do and I'm called to do. So you have to sometimes take a chance and take a risk and rebalance that scale to make sure that always what you love to do is far more than what you have to do. But in this life, there will always be things you have to do what you love to do. Somebody else, other insights?
I'm going to piggyback off that a little bit because the centering chapter hit home for me too, for the very things that you just talked about. I'm in a role that's brand new to a church and evaluating it 2 years in of what they thought the role would look like and what they want the role to look like and job description of the role. I'm at a point where I am. I'm doing more things that don't fuel me and give me life than I am doing the things that, and part of this class has kind of helped me realize that of like, where's the alignment in this? And so I'm in that season. I had the tough conversation with my boss this week. Like, I need to find some type of centering piece of this. And the chapters from the book help me to understand the importance of doing that, even though you run this risk of like, now we have to restructure and kind of look at some of these things, but to advocate for the alignment of the opportunities that not only I feel I'm gifted in, but that bring value to the ministry, and but those conversations are challenging to kind of have. So I appreciated it because it affirmed the feelings I was having and gave me the courage to step and have the conversation. So this week's readings couldn't have been more timely in my my life.
Well, we planned it that way, Rachel. We planned it that way.
Yeah.
All right, somebody else. Other insights? from the readings or what you're doing?
I think for me, a combination of the readings this week and then also your discussion last week that I watched on video was the importance of being an influencer. In my life and my leadership experience, I've always tried to lead by example, but I never ever considered myself an influencer. I mentioned in one of my papers, my daughter is quote unquote an influencer. She has like
Yeah,
100,000 different followers
I
on
remember
all
that.
her different TikTok and things like that. And that's what I consider an influencer, not so much me in a leadership role. And so just kind of taking that apart, dissecting it, re-examining it was really helpful for me in understanding what I want to do moving forward with my life and how I can use my leadership skills as an influencer, not just simply pushing a project forward or motivating a team, but again, taking that whole servant attitude and leading by example, bringing that forward as an influencer.
Oh, good, good. Glad that you were able to gain that insight. Somebody else? Anybody else?
One of the things that kind of stood out to me was I can't remember what chapter it was, but it was in leadership, beef jerky, the one about power, where
Different types of power.
yeah, exactly, where it was really helpful because I think that sometimes we can think of leadership in like a pretty single, one-dimensional way, where it's like, okay, I tell you to do this, you do it, and kind of continue with that. Whereas there are a lot of ways to hold power and to hold authority. It could be through influence. It could be through authority. It could just be through. You could leverage negotiations, or you can just say, in certain circumstances, we need to get this done. Let's get it done. So kind of like, and knowing that also lets you be much more creative and like which ones you can choose for the particular circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, how many of you are in a church context? Leadership. One of you. Organizations. You know, having a job description which delineates the authority that you have that's been delegated down from whoever you're answering to has a short shelf life. You know you're in trouble if you have to tell your team and remind them what your job description is and the authority you have. So sooner or later, it has to move from positional authority to personal authority. And personal authority can be a myriad of things, if you read in the chapter. It could be your expertise, it could be your networking capacity, it could be your resourcing ability, it could be your character. And so in the church, in volunteer situations, a position description has even a shorter shelf life, because the people that you lead, especially volunteers, they're not going to have happy feet because you told them, hey, look, I have the authority over you. That's what the position description says. Because remember, personal authority is given to you from the bottom up. Positional authority is given you from the top down. And so it's the people that you lead that will give you the room to lead. And so that's why the personal, but the apex of all of those power authorities has always been spiritual authority. And I think I gave you, or maybe I didn't, I don't remember now, the illustration of you can be in a room having a conversation with some people, and all of a sudden you feel the dynamics of the room have changed. You turn around and somebody walked in that possesses what you may not have realized is spiritual authority, because it always extends beyond the body. You can sense it in people when they have spiritual authority. Spiritual authority is not something that you acquire. It's something that is granted to you by your relationship with the Heavenly Father. The closer you are to Him, He anoints you. He gives you His imprimatur, which is a Latin word for seal of approval. And people sense that because the same spirit in you who has the spiritual authority is the same spirit that's in others that you're leading if they're Christians. And so that's why they sense it in you. If you have to tell somebody you have spiritual authority, guess what? You don't have it. It's not something you tell somebody about, but it's always contingent on the vibrancy of your relationship with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, God himself. And if you have a vibrant relationship, he will place on you a robe of spiritual authority and give you effectiveness far beyond what you can imagine. What you turn your hand to do, the results it'll produce will be exponential and not linear. And so it's not something you seek, it's something that's given to you. It's something that you're leasing, and it can be taken away from you, depending on unconfessed sin, the way that you treat people, because it's all spiritual authority is all relational. It's not transactional, it's transformative. Anybody else insights about what you were reading?
I think going along with the common theme of the centering, one of the biggest things that popped out was when it said Christ was never in a hurry. And then that kind of went along with in the
That's
focusing.
convicting, isn't it?
It's so convicting. I reread that so many times. And then it kind of flowed into the focusing area of like how precious our time is, but yet Jesus never hurried. And even Jesus, he knew how much time he had and he wasn't in a hurry to get all these things done. So it is very convicting in that aspect. And then kind of on that focusing spot too of like your passion and your calling is always going to sit on your heart and you're not going to really feel fulfilled until you kind of go with it. And I could kind of very much resonate to that to my life and what path I was on before. And then until you really take that calling, then you're like, oh yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. One of the things I hope that are going to be takeaways for you, each of you, is it's going to change the way in which you do interviews, because you're going to be asking different questions if you're the one being interviewed than you normally would. The higher up you go, the less your performance of a particular task or procedure matters. It's the relationships you have. And the questions, I've been at some fairly high levels in my life. It was more important to me who I was going to report to and how they led. And so I would, again, go back to my own leadership philosophy without telling them I did and ask how they lead. What frames their leadership? What can I expect from them? And here's what you can expect from me. And so, living a centered life means that you're living from the inside out. Living a balanced life, you're living from the outside in. Life happens in between plans. Crises come that you don't plan. And if all you're trying to do is maintain your balance by readjusting your priorities every month, you're headed for drainage and exhaustion, actually. And so when you live from a centered life, that you have a firm grip on your beliefs, your values, your worldview, what motivates you, then you're able to deal with whatever comes your way. And you don't have to be in a hurry. Somebody else, any other insights on your readings?
The centering thing was a new concept for me, so I don't need to say much about it. Many of you already have. That's great. Somebody else mentioned the gaining influence through spiritual authority as opposed to positional authority. You talked about that a little bit more as well. It's something that I just want to keep fresh in mind to make sure that I'm living by that idea. And then from Nonprofit Leadership, Chapter 12, the idea of leaders being close to those they lead or not being distant anyway. And making the small decisions, dealing with issues and not ignoring them so that they become big problems.
Yeah. When you decide not to decide, you've decided.
Right.
And if you decide not to decide, you're going to have to decide on far more than if you had just made the original decision to begin with. That's just the way it is. It's called log jamming. When you decide not to decide, it just jams another log into the log jam of your life. And it gets so complex after a while that the only way you can get out of it is dynamite the logjam. How do you do that? Well, you leave a job, you leave a location. Sometimes you even leave a relationship. You go downriver, and if you don't change the way in which you do it, you'll just create another logjam. And so you cannot get into the mode. Leaders need to make the decisions when you're faced with them and not put them off, because all it's going to do is produce more decisions that you'll have to make down the line. That even goes back to what you were saying, Brad, about hanging on to people for a long time. And you end up having to spend an awful lot of time buffering them and keeping them vibrant in your organization. And what you end up doing when you spend so much time with people that you shouldn't have hung on to is you're not spending the time with the people that deserve to be hung on to. And so you end up losing the very people that you count on because you spent all your time trying to resurrect the life of another person that should have probably been released before.
In ministry settings, I think I've seen a lot of times where a person that is supposed to be making a decision is afraid of offending somebody by making a decision. Yeah. And so they just don't. But that, like you say, it just creates a bigger and bigger and bigger problem usually.
Yeah, exactly. How about from you, John or Nicole? Insights from any of the readings? Vivian as well? I don't see your face, Vivian. I see you're on there. Anybody? Nicole, John, Vivian?
Oh, I think this week's reading inspires me because before, I always think like being a leader is about having like, a good educational background, and personal.
Yeah, I read that in I read that in your assignment. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but I think this week's reading shocked me that it's actually about inner transformation. I think it inspires me that our relationship with Christ will affect every relationship we have in our life, including the relationship that we are a leader and we need to lead other people. Especially, I'm working in the church, so it's in a church setting. So I'm keep like as you have mentioned, I'm keep influencing other people, and we are developing a relationship. So my relationship with Christ will affect every relationship I have. So I think this is what shocked me.
Thank you, Vivian. Nicole or John? John, go ahead. Your mic's off, John. Turn your mic on. You're there you go. You're on now.
Yeah, so reading Nonprofit Leadership, chapter 12, the things that really touched my heart. Like now, so we're not supposed to compromise Christ-centered redemptive work for the individual cultures and society. So there are always temptations to, when you're working in the field, people trying to sometimes mislead you, or you're tempted to go with what you find on the ground. Like sometimes in Africa, you are in a church, yes, a group believe it's good to drink alcohol, and they want to be in the church leadership. You go look at the Bible, you find it's not easy, so you have to stop them. So I agree with this idea that we cannot compromise Christ-centered redemptive work. I remember also sometimes back in Africa, there are churches we could go, and we find people are involved so much in tobacco growing and selling of tobacco, and they want to leave the church. So I tell them, you don't qualify to be in the church board because of that. Then they say, this is a bad pastor coming here to stop our development. So you don't want us to get money. So something like this, I look at this, what is written here is true. Every time we are tempted to compromise, maybe you want to go with the people, or you want to go with the word of God, the Bible, then you know God has sent you, and you know what God wants to tell them. That's how you go. So I agree with what I read in this chapter 12. We don't need to compromise the Christ-centered redemptive work.
Yeah.
And there are a few things also that I came across, that faithfulness, that we need to remain faithful every time because God is watching us. And we need to go to God so much because they say Jesus was very prayerful. It was like praying daily. So for us to succeed outside in the field, we have to be engaged in a lot of prayer. So this one is also really good for me, like going out to lead. And so also there are few things that I also liked in chapter 15 that we are designed now we're outside there, not doing nothing, but we're doing something that's trying to produce spiritually, form disciples of Jesus Christ, making them from family, from the church, wherever God is sending them to make people. Actually, somebody spoke to us and we came like this. So you have to do the same thing, trying to make disciples for Christ. People can stand on their own and work and spread the gospel. Also good in chapter 15 of finishing well.
Yeah.
And then, so I like the mandate. Say effective discipleship is driven by the Great Commission mandate. That was in page 267 of chapter 15. Yeah, to go and make disciples, teaching them to obey everything Jesus commanded us to do. I just felt this is starts with my family. I don't want to see my family in the fire when Jesus will come. So it starts making disciples in my family first, then my friends, then relatives, then going out wherever God is sending me to, then the church. And it's not something simple because converting them, baptizing them, teaching them, not just abandoning them, teaching them to make sure they grew. Because those people who really converted us, baptized us, they worked on us a lot. Now we don't need them. We can go out also convert people. We need to do the same thing too, like in chapter 15. That's what I really liked in this chapter. So
you know what's interesting is one of the things that I hope that you're grasping is that you have a responsibility to others, but you cannot take responsibility for others. The only one that you can take responsibility for is yourself. So being responsible to them, as you were saying, John, is sometimes telling them things that they don't want to hear, calling them to a life that they don't want to live. And you have to, because we're all followers of Christ and leading under his mandate, we have to make sure that we're acknowledging to whose flag we're flying, and that we have to go ahead, and we're given this wonderful privilege. Sometimes God is going to call you to be a sage on a stage where you have information no one else has, or you have an ability no one else does that needs to be transferred to those that you're leading. But most of the time, the most effective leadership is guided by the side. But that doesn't mean an accommodation of the weaknesses or limitations. And so I was talking to my wife yesterday, and I said, why is it, Debbie and I have been married for 57 years. And I said, why is it, honey, the people that have really got their act together are always the ones being asked to compromise to the level of somebody that doesn't have their act together? And so it seems to be that people who really do are centered and are leading effectively are often asked to compromise the way they lead to accommodate the weakness or the limitation of those that they're leading. And so that's why it's kind of hard to go ahead and let some people go. And sometimes we dumb down our leadership to accommodate somebody else. That's different, of course, than situational leadership, where you're changing your style to meet the readiness of those you're leading. That's different than that. And John, you're absolutely right. Nowhere in the Bible do I find the word compromise. It's not found there. And we're not to ever compromise on our beliefs and our values. And so we lead out of the strength of those things. So why in the world would we dumb them down or reduce them just to accommodate a situation or a circumstance? And so anyway, thank you, John. How about you, Nicole? You're the last one left.
I liked chapter 12 and talking about the characteristics of a leader. And specifically, I liked the section that he had on communication and then like communicating that you care for others, not just communicating efficiently and effectively, but that it's important to communicate that you care for the person as a person, not just as someone under you.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming alongside of them again to show that you care for them. And sometimes showing care is telling them again things that they don't want to hear and being faithful to that. And I think as you read in Leadership Beef Jerky, or I'm getting mixed up because I just edited my new book and I had that principle in there. So I don't know if I put it in Leadership Beef Jerky about fat Christians. I know I told you about those. The only time you don't have to go on a diet to be faithful, available, and teachable. God uses leaders who are faithful, available, and teachable, fat leaders. And so we need to be looking for other fat leaders. Okay.
Professor?
Yeah, go ahead, Vivian.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't feel very comfortable. I may have to leave the class early.
Okay. All right. Are you going to be able, Vivian, to get those assignments in on time?
I think so. Yeah, I just want to rest for like a little bit and take some meds.
That's all right, Vivian.
I'm so sorry.
No problem. That's all right. You can just look at the video when it's recorded. All right, guys, let's go ahead and go to what I wanted to share with you in terms of the PowerPoint, because we won't rehearse the 2 assignments you put in. We already have discussed those. But I want to go ahead and focus on the shift that we're now going to be making between you as a leader and moving now to you leading a project. So I want to show you how all of that fits together and how the various assignments fit together. So let's go ahead and move to that. Let me share something here. All right. Let me find it here. Back to the Zoom. And let's do the sharing. Can you see in front of you the PowerPoint?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, hold on a second here. Let me get to it right here. And let me go to advanced, share. How about now? Can you see it now?
Yeah, it's there.
Okay, all right. Let me go ahead and broaden it out. How about that? It's the wide screen now. Can everyone see it okay? Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, we won't cover this. What I was talking about, this whole left side, these 4 weeks that you've been involved, and we're actually in that 4th week, was all about you as a leader. And this side is all about you leading a project. That's why it's so important for you to identify the project you're going to be working on. So you had guiding principles and your personal leadership philosophy. That was your assignment. And we're going to go right through this and move right into it. Now, here are the key assignments. On the left-hand side of that graphic I just showed you, that mind map, these were all the graded assignments. Personal improvement plan was for the undergraduates. The situational leadership assessment was for graduates. Assessing a whole person, undergraduates. Life development plan. And then this last assignment that you had to turn in by midnight tonight. Here are the assignments, the significant assignments you're going to be doing on the right side of that graphic. You'll be doing a need assessment, vision statement, leadership development strategy, and finally a plan. And so it's kind of hard to understand how that fits together until you take a look at something like this. So this next week, you're going to be doing a needs assessment. The needs assessment establishes the viability of the project that you're going to either create or revise. In other words, you're going to either, by using a tool of interviews or observations or a focus group or a survey or a questionnaire about, let's say that you are going to revise something that's broken. So you're going to craft a survey to give to people that will determine whether or not what you're seeing, they're seeing. So the needs assessment, regardless of whether it's a focus group or a survey, or it's observations, or it's a questionnaire, or you're looking over all of the gathered materials that show whether or not that program has been effective. Because what you're trying to do with the needs assessment, even though you might have in your mind this project, it's not your hobby horse. You've got to validate that it's really needed. That's what a need assessment is, to validate what you want to do, whether it's revise or create something. Is there a need for it, is what you're trying, that's the overarching question. Is there a need for it? That's what you're going to be resolving. So that assignment is due at the end of next week, okay? Now, what you're looking at is the actual ministry plan. This whole graphic is the actual ministry plan. This right here, ministry or nonprofit plan. Your assignments that you're going to be doing, like the needs assessment, the mission vision assignment, the leadership development strategy, are all going to fold into your plan. On week 7, you should have a draft of your plan you can share with your classmates, and they will give you feedback. That's why that's the only assignment you're going to have to get done in the 4th day of week 7 and not wait till the end of it, because you're waiting to get feedback. And you can make a decision whether or not you're going to embrace that feedback. Was the feedback helpful, and are you going to adjust the way in which you're going to approach your project, or is it tangential and you'll put it away for a later time? That's your decision. But you're not going to know that unless you get feedback from your other classmates on your plan. Then week 8, you're submitting the final ministry plan. You've already going to have 3 pieces of it right here that you're going to fold into the plan. Like, for instance, when you put together your leadership development strategy, it's based on your project, not an overarching strategy. In other words, who am I going to select to help me with this project? How am I going to train them? How am I going to evaluate them? What authority will I give them? What task will I assign them? That's all the leadership development strategy for that project. So you're restricting this to the project. Is that understood? I can see you on the right-hand side, and that's why I'm asking it, to make sure. If you have a question in the middle of my verbosity, stop me, raise your hand, and ask the question, okay? So when you're talking about a ministry plan, you're talking about not only the needs assessment, the vision statement, you'll be putting together, and we'll get into this, annual objectives, strategies to meet those objectives. It's kind of like a strategic plan if you've ever done one. But the difference between a strategic plan and a ministry plan is you have to leave room in your plan for the Holy Spirit in a ministry plan. Let me give you an example. When I was an executive pastor of a large church in San Diego, we put together a 3-year strategic plan. What we didn't anticipate was that at that time, refugees from Cuba were going to be located right near our church. So we had to flex our ministry plan to accommodate that unforeseen need. Strategic plans are much more solid in a business, but a ministry plan needs to be a little more flexible and allow the Holy Spirit to adjust it to His plan. Does that make sense, everyone? So this graphic just kind of shows you the various components that'll be in your strategic plan. And 3 of the components, of course, are already going to have been completed by the time you finally put together your plan. But this will be kind of the guideline for your strategic plan. So let me get to this other thing here. Any questions about that so far? Any questions about that graphic?
When you said observations, does that mean like observations from people that we're talking about, or observation that we're talking to, or
you're talking
observations
about the needs assessment, Ezekiel?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, observations from people who have received the benefit of that program, and their needs might not be met. It may have been designed to meet their needs, but the way in which it's morphed in its application, it's not meeting the needs it was designed to meet. The only way you're going to find that out is talking to the people that it was going to benefit. The other observational piece will be the people that are actually working in that program. What is their insights? And so you're going to be taking a look at both of those, and then to try to determine what you need to be doing in revising that program. And it'll affect your mission vision statement that follows. Okay? You don't want to identify a mission, vision, values, and biblical assumptions until you have clarity about the project and its validity. And the only way you get that is through a needs assessment. So every one of you will have to do a needs assessment for your project. Now, here's what generally consists of a strategic plan or a ministry plan. The upper three levels is your compass. Okay? That's where you craft your mission, vision, beliefs, and values. And the reason why it's designed the way it is, the wider part, is because the further down you go, the more specific the plan becomes. But these first three, the beliefs and values, your biblical assumptions, mission and vision, is the compass that will help you not lose your way when you're doing all of these things below. So that's why these first three, a mission, vision, beliefs, and values, is called the compass, and the objective, strategies, implementation plans, and evaluation is the roadmap. The needs assessment is assessing the topography in which that project will rest. So your needs assessment is done up here. Okay? When you do your needs assessment, then you're going to go ahead and craft your mission, vision, and values, which will be your DNA of your project. And then you're going to get down into the nitty-gritty by identifying annual objectives, the strategies that will help you reach the objective you set, and how you're going to implement those individual strategies, and finally, how you're going to evaluate progress in the implementation of those strategies. So that's the whole plan. Your ministry plan will include all of this. Okay? So on the first part of it here that I've got circled, your mission, vision, beliefs, and values, it answers these three questions. What does the environment for ministry look like? Your needs assessment will answer that question. How would God want us to respond to the ministry environment? That's your mission, vision, and values and biblical assumptions. What key principles will inform and guide our ministry activities? Those are essentially your values for that particular project. So these first three questions deal with the DNA or the compass of your plan. Now, when we look at these other three, you see the dotted line here. It kind of separates the compass from the roadmap. In this case, you're answering these following four questions. What are the major results we hope to obtain? That's what we mean by objectives. The second question is, what strategies will we employ to reach our objectives? In other words, what process, what procedure, what tactic, what function, whatever it is, what strategies are you going to use to reach that objective? If your objective is to grow your small group ministry by 15%, that's your objective, right? Then what strategies are you going to employ to make that happen? Well, I'm going to redesign the training guide for leaders. I'm going to be doing this, that, or the other thing. Those are strategies to reach your objectives. The next question is, how will these strategies be implemented? In other words, what's the timeline here? What leaders am I going to need? That's where your leadership development strategy will plug in. And so the implementation deals with things like, what obstacles do I anticipate running into? Am I going to run into problems getting funding? Am I going to end it in problems by some naysayers? How am I going to handle those objections to what I'm trying to accomplish? That's all a part of implementation. Implementation, all right, what resources am I going to need to bring this project to life? Am I going to need new materials? Am I going to need to repurpose older materials? Am I going to have to purchase materials? What am I going to have to do? That's all part of implementation. The last question, how do we intend to evaluate our progress? The only time, guys, that you're guaranteed 100% accuracy is when you aim at nothing. You're bound to hit it. Let me say that again. The only time you're guaranteed 100% accuracy is when you aim at nothing. You will hit it. You'll gain nothing. Evaluation is a means, and there are two types of evaluations. There are formative evaluations and summative evaluations. It's a formative evaluation. Like, for instance, we just piloted with some Navy SEALs in Virginia, phase 1 of our Heart of a Warrior called the Compass. Okay? So what we did while he was going through it is every video that was shown or every narrated PowerPoint, were there glitches in it? Did it get to the heart of it? Were the assignments not clear? So you're doing a formative evaluation as it is going on. At the very end, you're doing a summative evaluation. Okay, what did we accomplish? What do we need to fix? What do we need to revise? So evaluation is critical. Your evaluation should always be tied to the objectives you set. Okay? Otherwise, what good is the objective? If you're expecting certain things, how are you going to evaluate whether or not you got there? So evaluation is the next piece. So that is and as you can see, the upside down pyramid narrows because it gets very, very specific the further down this strategic or this ministry planning graphic goes. That's why they're wide at the top and narrow at the bottom. All right. Any questions about that I've just shown you?
I have a question. So
Yeah.
are we essentially, we're planning and implementing this at the same time so we can have an evaluation? I'm confused at how we get the evaluation if we're not actually.
Yeah. No, you're not going to go ahead. What you're doing is when you lay out the plan implementation, this is your plan. And when you identify the evaluation, you're not actually doing the formative or summative. You may be setting it up to do that.
Okay, so how you would evaluate.
Yeah,
okay.
It's how you would do it. And chances are you might change that when you're actually doing a prototype. Any new program, by the way, goes through 3 stages: prototype, pilot, and launch. The prototype is very, very general. You revise it after you do formative and summative evaluation. Now it becomes a pilot, and you run out the pilot with a select group, and you do formative and summative evaluation on that to finalize it, and now you're ready to launch it. So your implementation plan might want to include those 3 phases. If it's brand new: prototype, pilot, launch. That make sense, guys?
I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure I understood we're not actually doing it. We're planning how we would evaluate the process if we were doing it.
Yeah, that's right. Because this is a plan. That's why it's a plan and it's not an operation. Because you're not operating it yet. You haven't launched it yet. But this is the plan that's going to provide the guidance you need to launch it eventually. Okay, on the needs assessment again, there's in the leadership material resources, I believe I put a document about needs assessment that actually goes into much greater detail about surveys, focus groups, whatever you choose to validate or invalidate. What's interesting about a needs assessment is that once a needs assessment is done, you may say, boy, did I have this wrong? I was trying to fix something that wasn't broke. And here's what was broken. So I need to change my perspective on the project. That's the value of a needs assessment. Right on, but you need substantive data. And one of the reasons you need the substantive data from a needs assessment is when you sell it to somebody who's going to have to fund it. They're going to know what you did to validate the need for this rather than just being your hobby horse. So that's a secondary issue. But when you do a needs assessment, it's hard to argue with a well-done needs assessment in terms of the need for that particular project or plan or program or ministry. So the needs assessment is very, very important. Let me get by this here. So a needs assessment, again, is a systematic process for determining and addressing needs or gaps between current conditions and desired conditions or wants. The discrepancy between the current condition, if you're talking about revising something, or even if you're starting something new, the current condition may be there's nothing that's addressing this. All right, so let me say again, the discrepancy between the current condition and wanted condition must be measured to appropriately identify the need. The need can be a desire to improve current performance or to correct a deficiency. So the biblical basis for this kind of a thing in the assessment, Proverbs 14:8, the wisdom of the prudent is to discern his way, but the folly of fools is deceiving. Proverbs 24:3-6, by wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. A wise man is full of strength, and a man of knowledge enhances his might. For by wise guidance you can wage your war, and in an abundance of counselors there is victory. Needs assessment, you're looking at abundance of counselors. They may be the audience for that matter. And finally, in Luke chapter 14:28-32, for which of you desiring to build a tower does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, the man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king going out to encounter another king in war will not sit down first and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? And if not, well, the other is yet a great way off. He sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So you can apply that passage to this planning that you're doing. You just don't go into battle, in other words, without a plan. And whether or not you should even engage the battle is what needs assessment is all about. So the questions to consider in doing a needs assessments are the following. What external factors suggest a need for the project? What's happening outside that says there's a need for the project? The second question, what internal factors suggest a need for the project? In other words, within the context of your organization. What does the ministry environment look like? Why is the project needed? What gap will the project fill? Who will be served by the project? What specific needs does the project address? The results of your needs assessment should justify and validate the selected project. If it doesn't, it's the wrong project. All right, I'll stop right there. As again, there's a resource. Well, actually, let me just show you this right here. It's not as complicated as I've laid out on the screen, but these 4 blocks are what you're trying to do. Explore what is, gather the data, analyze the data, and then make decisions. Okay? And making the decision means deciding priority need, determining the relevant project, visualizing the project structure. So you have in your mind before you even do this, This is what I think is needed. You might change it once you go through these steps, or narrow it. Chad, when we were talking about being too big, this will help you narrow it to something that's more manageable. Okay. Any questions about a needs assessment that I just shared with you? Is that helpful to understand what I'm looking for? You look stunned. Did I overwhelm you? I hope not. Is it understandable? Just raise your hand if it is. Okay. All right. If there's no questions, we'll go on. Is there any questions? I'm not hearing any. All right. Now, when you get to the mission vision statement, because remember, next week you're doing two things. You're doing the needs assessment, and then based on that needs assessment, you're putting together the mission vision statement summary. Okay? So when we talk about mission and vision, sometimes organizations flip those two. They call a vision a mission and a mission a vision. But for our purposes, this is what I want us to look at in terms of the difference between a mission and a vision. A mission is biblical, general, transferable, comprehensive, transitional, and transcendent. In other words, we want to develop people who know how to study God's word. That's a mission. A vision is also biblical, but it's much more specific. Generally, a vision is 1 to 2, maybe even 3 paragraphs. Whereas a mission statement might be just a phrase or a sentence. A vision is localized, whereas a mission could be done anywhere. In other words, people everywhere that are Christian need to know how to study the Bible. But how is it going to be different in your setting? That's where the vision statement comes in, that localizes it, makes it distinctive, makes it relevant to that situation, and it's now transactional. That's the difference between the two. Now, the values that you're going to be putting together in your mission, vision, and value, they're aspirational, they're propositional, they're not seasonal, they're often drawn from the Bible that distinguish us from others. Like, for instance, if you were wanting to put together a program to teach people how to study the Bible, a value might be that the Word of God is living and active. A value might be that it's the only offensive weapon we have. A value might be a phrase, it could be a sentence, it could be a short paragraph. So values really answer the questions: what hills are we prepared to die on? What principles do we intend to live by in this project? What are the guidelines we hope to adhere to? What rules will we follow? So every project should have at least 3 to 5 values that frame the DNA of your project. In other words, as you go through implementation, and there's questions that you ask, you're always going to go back up to your DNA and process them through the filter of your values. I can't tell you how many churches I've counseled, have been brought in as a consultant, where there was absolutely no correlation with their values and what they did. There were platitudes that were on a wall. I said, if you're not operating off of these values, if they don't condition how you spend money or how you apportion the budget, if they don't deal with how you're going to make that thing come alive, then get rid of them and adopt some other values. They're not propositions. They're working values. They're the filter through which you process decisions that you're going to make as you implement your program, your ministry, or your project. Any questions about that? Okay.
Can I go back and ask one clarifying question on the needs assessment?
Yeah.
What is the actual deliverable we're turning in? If I do surveys, do you want to see all the surveys, or do you want me to write up something?
Absolutely not. I want to see a summary of it.
Okay,
Oh, I
so
shouldn't have
what
said that. Well, I'd love to see it, Chad, but it's not necessary.
what is the length and scope of
All right,
what we're
here's what
turning
it
in?
says in the syllabus. Conduct a needs assessment to justify the need of your project. The following methods can help determine legitimate need: questionnaire or survey, an interview of possible beneficiaries, observations that validate the need, existing evaluations of a similar project, conduct a focus group or analysis. It can be a one-page document that just gives us a summary. Here's why this program, this ministry is justified.
Okay.
So you might be drawing some information from all the stuff that you may have gathered in the needs assessment, but you're not regurgitating everything you gathered.
Okay.
You're summarizing it, you're condensing it, you're bringing out the most important points that really do validate your project.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
But just
Anybody else?
one question.
Yeah.
But we're not actually doing the survey, right? So if I was going to survey like the town of Redwood Falls, you know, or the church, do you want us to do that?
If you were actually going to do this, you would have to eventually do it.
I know, but this is just a summary of like what we do.
What you're doing here in this for this class, I would pick a process that's easy to manage, like observations or looking over existing data. I mean, it takes a long time to get back a survey. I mean, if it's a small group of people that you have immediate access to and have them do the survey in front of you, that's one thing. So just pick the tool that best accommodates it. And you don't do, I mean, if you were going to do this in real life, Brad, you might want to factor in 3 months to go ahead and craft a survey, get the results back and analyze them. Or you might have a 5-question survey you're doing with a group of people that will benefit from your project.
Okay.
So just make it more manageable. Is that helpful?
Yeah, very. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Now, here's what I was brought in. This is my church, Calvary Church, because when I was an executive pastor of a church in Rochester, I created a men's ministry that in 1 year we had 250 men active in the ministry. And so oftentimes I get called in. I was called into Colorado for a couple of mega churches that wanted to start a men's ministry. And so I've had a lot of experience with men's ministries. But in this particular case, I was asked, because I'm a member of the church and because I've had experience building and launching a men's ministry, to help them craft a men's ministry. And here's what we came up with regard to the mission, vision, and values, the DNA of the plan. The mission was simply this: changing lives man to man. And what was the vision? It was going to include 4 different things: to engage, to connect, to equip, and impact. And the values, there's the values. So this kind of gives you an idea of what I'm kind of looking for from you. It's as simple as that. I mean, it takes some thought to put that together, obviously. But and by the way, when you do your values, make sure there's a scriptural reference associated with it. Make sure it's a biblical value. Okay? So anyway, that's kind of how it looks. Any questions about that vision statement that is the second assignment that you're going to have to turn in? You only have a week to do this, so I expect you to not wait till the last minute. You got to really give some thought to this, but do it something that's workable for you. Okay?
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
So like on the example you're giving us here, this Calvary Church Men's Ministry, what was your objective there?
For this whole thing?
Did you have an objective? Because you want us to write objective too. What was your objective?
The objectives, John, come after the mission vision statement. Because once you set this mission vision statement, what you're heading towards, that's going to frame everything you do, that's when you do the objectives. So let's say, for instance, that this was embraced. The next step with the team that I was working with, okay, what objectives do we want to accomplish in the first year? What objectives do we want to accomplish in the second year, and what objectives do we want to accomplish in the third year? Or what a single objective for each of them? And so in order to go ahead and change men's lives, we're going to have to do something. We're going to have some objectives that are going to inform that process, and then strategies that will help us reach those objectives. So your objectives come after your mission, vision, value statement.
Okay.
Do you want us to try to create this in a visual format like you have?
Whatever you're comfortable with. I mean, if you want to put the thing in a PowerPoint, I have happy feet about that. Okay? If you're artistic and you want to do it that way, but make sure there's enough explanation. Like whenever I put together a PowerPoint, if you went to the notes page, you see a lot of notes behind this. So if you want to turn it in as a PowerPoint, that's fine with me. It might even be fun to do it that way. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So here's the questions that are answered by each of these. A mission, where are we going moving forward? What do we want to achieve in the future? That's our mission, right? That's our ultimate thing we want to do. What kind of future organization do we envision? A vision statement, what do we do today? So the mission statement is always present, future. The vision statement is always present. What do we do today? Who do we serve? What are we trying to accomplish? What impact do we want to achieve? That's why I said that your vision statement should be at least 2 paragraphs, maybe even 3. Because you want to localize it. Like, for instance, when I was executive pastor of that church in San Diego, we put together what we called at that time the strategic plan. It was to enfold and I can't think of it now. Anyway, we had this mission statement, and so we had to go ahead and localize it to how is College Avenue Church going to implement this, because a mission statement could be applied in any context if they had a similar concern, where a vision statement is very specific to your environment. Okay, values. What do we stand for? What behaviors do we value over all else? Related to the project now. And by the way, if your ministry is underneath the church and it's larger one, the values you select shouldn't contradict the church's values, but they shouldn't be a replication of them either. Because it's very specific to that project. How will we conduct our activities to achieve our mission and vision? What principles will guide our implementation? So those are kind of the questions that will be asked, that you should be answering for your mission vision statement. All right. So, any questions, comments? Andy?
Yeah, I've heard it said that mission is like the star on the horizon. It's like the long-term aim of where you're going. Yep. And the vision is the next mountain you're climbing, the one right in front of you.
That's a great way to put it,
pretty accurate.
Andy.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Because your mission statement, I remember that there was a church that had a mission statement to make fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ. That was the mission statement. Well, what church wouldn't want that as a mission statement? They may have a different one, but it's generally applied. But their vision statement defined how they were actually going to reach that star. In other words, what a vision statement has is kind of embedded in it some of the strategies you may use. Oh, I remember now, the College Avenue was win, fold, equip, and deploy. That was the mission statement. The vision statement was how we were going to win them, how we were going to, unfold them, how we were going to equip them, how we were going to deploy them. And each one of them was a paragraph. It didn't tell everything. It was a broad statement, but it was localized to College Avenue. Any other comments or statements? Okay, so this next week, this is what you're going to be doing. Now, for undergraduates and graduates, it's the same assignment. You're going to put together a needs assessment to justify your project and a vision statement and improvement summary. Now, you'll notice in the syllabus, here's what it says about the vision statement and improvement summary. Prepare and submit a model vision statement and summary for your selected ministry or nonprofit project to include mission, vision, values that will undergird the initiative and will serve as a DNA to your project. The vision statement should be approximately 2 to 3 pages and with all sources cited in APA format. The statement should also include at least 3 ways it will be communicated to the organization and those outside of the organization, like stakeholders. So how are you going to communicate this vision statement to somebody that is either going to write the checks, or that's you're looking for support, or maybe even be to the senior pastor, or maybe to the CEO of your company, maybe to the CFO of your company? Okay, so how are you going to communicate it to them? Well, one way to communicate them is in a PowerPoint presentation. So you put together a PowerPoint presentation, but the sole purpose is to communicate the vision. That's all you're trying to accomplish. Any other questions or comments? It may seem overwhelming, but the destination of 1,000 miles begins with the first step, as the Chinese would say. That's why, again, Shad, I'm saying keep it limited to what you want to accomplish. Because this is just simply giving you practice how to think as a leader. So whatever context you go to in the future, you're going to run into organizations that do none of this. That's why they're floundering. You're going to be, remember we talked about influence being direct, indirect, and organizational? So you go into an organization, you might be the one person that tells them, you know what, if we're going to do this, we have to do some planning, and here are the kinds of questions we need to answer, like those 7 questions I gave you at the beginning of this presentation. That's having organizational influence, because they've blown it all the time and wasted money because they didn't do the planning. Everybody wants to get to the implementation, but the implementation is going to flounder if you don't do the planning up front and set the DNA of what you're trying to accomplish. It'll always keep you in check, and it'll provide boundaries for what you want to accomplish. I've done lots of these. So I'm giving you my experience of what I've experienced. Any other comments or questions? All right, let me get out of this, stop sharing here. Guys, I hope you felt tonight was beneficial. I mean, these 2 things, they could be overwhelming had you not been sitting in on this presentation. At least that's my thought. Because me explaining it and what it actually looks like with the PowerPoint and everything else, maybe it helps you get a better handle on what is being required of you. And it'll be easier for you to accomplish the task. As a professor, I'm less interested in the grades as I am in the process of you learning. And then being able to convert that learning, like in 2 Timothy 2:2, passing on to others what you've learned. That gives me happy feet. The grades are what you have to do at an institution. But what I'm trying to teach you, what I'm trying to come side by side with you on, are things that will help you be effective for the kingdom. That's what drives me. What will be effective to facilitate God's redemptive purposes in a fallen world? Because each of you will have a different part to play in the mosaic of God's activity. So you each have a place in God's overall plan. That's why it says in Ephesians 2:10 that God prepared in advance a unique purpose for your life. Anybody else have any closing comments?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Say a person totally buys into what you're saying, but there may be a second or third tier leader at an organization, at a church, at whatever the place is, and the leadership above them does not seem to care or has not done any of this. How do you recommend going about getting those above you to buy into this process?
It depends on how well you sell it, really. I mean, they're going to be what they're going to be. I mean, if you have the authority to do something, act on that authority. When you're trying to gain acceptance of something, Chad, think of a bell curve, okay? There will always be 10 to 15% of the people that you engage that are going to love whatever you do. On the other side of the bell curve, there's always going to be 10 to 15% of the people that are going to hate whatever you do. Your interest is in the middle. You're never going to win everybody over. But if 90% of the people object to what you're going to do, then it's your problem. But live with the tension that there will always be people who are going to be early adopters that are going to, because they love you, they're going to agree to do whatever you want to do, but there'll always be the critics on the other end. Don't be bound by the critics. If you spend all your time trying to answer the questions of the critics or appealing to the people who love you to get appreciation, you miss the opportunity to change the middle, which is the 70% in the middle. 10 to 15 on either end, 70% is what you're concerned about. If you get 70% buy-in or even 65% buy-in, I remember, again, at College Avenue, the senior pastor was in a meeting and I was there as the executive pastor. He was meeting with board members. He started sharing a dream about what he wanted to accomplish. And when he was presenting that dream, the first thing I noticed, because I trained as a naval intelligence officer and knowing that 90% of communication is in nonverbals. And so I was paying attention to that. I watched him. He never used closed hand or his finger. He always used open hands when he was expressing something important. That's the first thing I noticed. That's my compulsivity, I guess. But the other thing was, after he shared this vision, there was enough objection, even though he had 75% buy-in, he decided to put it off to a later time. It was the right thing to do, but the wrong time to do it. That's how he used it. But he wasn't going to be just simply responding and reactive to the critics or going to the people who love him to get support. He knew the crisis was the 70% in the middle. Not the crisis, but the audience that would benefit the most. That's who he wanted to win over. So when you put together your communication plan, think about that inverted or that sinusoidal waveform there. 10 to 15, 10 to 15, 70 to 80 in the middle.
Can I ask a question piggybacking off of that?
Sure.
So in your years of experience with this idea of a bell curve, as the leader, you see the 10 to 15% on the side of positivity and the 10 to 15% on the negativity. As the leader receiving both of those things, how do you respond internally or reflectively to both sides of the spectrum? So in your experience as a leader, when you get the criticism, how have you processed that and used it? Or how do you take in the positivity and process that and use it to make you a better leader? Because both will happen.
That's a very good question. What I first do is find out if I heard them correctly. Here's the criticism I heard you share. Did I hear you correctly? Because you could be answering a question they're not even asking. So you first have to determine what are they indeed critical of. Then you only answer the question they're asking. You don't embellish it. They may not receive it. They may still object, but at least you're answering them. At least you heard them. As a leader, sometimes you have to make a decision that you don't get total buy-in, but it's still the right decision. So you live with the crisis or the critics that are going to be always nipping at your heels. You got to worry about the 70 to 80% that are going to benefit in the middle. So on the other side of that bell curve, which you asked, is the people that appreciate you. always, I'll just be honest with you. I use it as water off a duck's back. I say, well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your encouragement. And if you really are supportive of this, then would you get the word out? Would you share with others? That would be very helpful to me. That's all I do with those people.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments, guys? All right. I hope this evening has been helpful to you. If you have any questions that are emergent in nature, you know my phone number, or you know my email, and I'll get back to you. And I'm compulsive about it. When I'm asked a question, or even when I read something, like I did with you, Ezekiel, and I saw that you had questions, well, I thought I could help you by responding right away with some of the material I'd already put together to aid you in your understanding. So in any case, I'm really enjoying being with you guys, and I just hope you, by the time we're done, you feel the same way. We'll see how that pans out. John, could you hold on for a minute? I wanted to talk with you for just a second when we close down. Would you just stay on the line for a bit? Okay, could I close this in a word of prayer, guys? Unless there's anything else you want to say? Father, so grateful for these leaders. I have such hope for the future as I look at leaders like this that are asking the kind of questions they're asking and are involved in the kinds of activities they're involved in. I ask that you would anoint them. I ask that you would bless them, Lord. I ask that you would give them focus, intentionality, purpose, and direction. And I'd honor you for that because they're seeking to honor you, and I know you want to honor them. So just bless them. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. All right, guys. Have a wonderful week. Enjoy the assignments. Hang in there, John. I'll be right with you.
Okay.
John, I sent something back to you. I did get your assignment, and I graded it. But when I send you an email, I really do expect a response, because I sent 3 of them. I heard nothing, and I was getting ready to go to the administration and say, look, I don't know what's happening with John. I don't know if he's in trouble or if something's going on, but I haven't had it. And you just before I was going to do that, I got your email saying you submitted your assignment. So please, when I send you an email, respond so I know at least. You don't have to spend a lot of words. I heard what you said. That's fine. Okay. And then the other thing I would encourage you to do is to make sure you read the syllabus, what's being required of you, because you answered the other group's question, as I shared with you, when I was asking for the whole person. But if anything is never clear or is not clear, because I know there may be a language difference or we have come from different cultures, I'd be glad to spend more time with you and elaborate whenever you need to. Again, I'm just a phone call away.
Okay.
Okay,
so,
brother?
Go ahead. So, I'm sorry, I saw the email. Actually, there were 2 long emails. And then you said down there, call me immediately. And so
that's because I hadn't heard from you.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard from you, so I said, call me immediately.
Yeah, so I said, okay, I need to call. But then let me write. But I'm sorry because you sent 2 emails. I did not respond back. That is not something good. I'm sorry. That's my kind of mistake. So I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. No problem, John.
Always respond back to the emails. And then, so why I didn't check the syllabus, because in the past I used to answer the assignments, but I mean, starting the syllabus, going to the actual assignment. I realized some of them were just the same copy. Like this is the copy of this. So I realized I don't want to understand. But this case, I realized there was a benefit going back to the syllabus, because the things that were missing in the assignment that were just in the
exactly
in the syllabus. So I think like the project you're giving us today, I think as you talk, when I'm going to write, I know what's going to help me is the syllabus, and also your PowerPoint. This PowerPoint is gonna help me a lot when I'm making mine because okay, as we're talking, I say, okay, that's the vision statement. That's the mission now. Those are the values. What is the objective? Okay, so
yeah, I understand. Well, the advantage, John, is that all these sessions. Well, let me go ahead and make sure that I'm off record here.